hard to see that it's the union.
Welcome to Labor's View. This show is brought to you by the very hardworking and dedicated employees, non-supervisory employees of the Essex County Division of Welfare, and they are also members of our union, Local 1081 of the Communications Workers of America, or CWA Local 1081. I'm David Weiner, President of the union and host of Labor's View. This evening we'll do, from my lovely palatial home, we will do a show regarding our agency specifically. As I have no guests, I am my guest except for our beautiful dog Day Day here, to talk about the agency, what's been going on for the last month. It's been a haranguing time for both the employees and the clients alike, and I'll tell you why. Yesterday we had a revolt of the security guards at 18 Rector Street, which is a privately owned facility building, which is next to the New Jersey PAC, directly contiguous, and across the street from the YMCA, Newark YMCA. And what happened is I got a phone call in my house around 7:15 on my cell at 7:15 from one of my shop stewards, or a text or an email, I don't remember. And they were saying the guards were revolting. They weren't letting any of the clients into the building because the guards had not been paid. Well, the guards belong to a new security company that just started with our county. They were the low ball bidder back, and they started in January, and the guards were maintaining they'd not been paid by their employer. And I checked with the county, they said they had paid the employer, so they weren't letting anybody in. First thing I did was call the chief of staff to the county executive, Phil Elijah, who was very cooperative, and I called him on his cell. I said, Phil, we got a big problem. You better get some sheriff's officers over there because we need security. There are hundreds of clients in the street, and they're not going to be happy campers if they're out there in the cold too long. Right, Day Day? Right. So what happened was, then I called my department director, who's also a councilman in Newark, Nebo Ramos, and told him the same thing, and he thought the same as I. And by the time I got there later on, the guards had gone back to work. There were sheriff's officers there, including Sergeant Brandt, who's a great guy, and I'll mention him later in another context. And all's well that ended well, and I don't know if they got paid or not, but they came back on the job. What's the matter, Day? Everything's okay. So that was our revolt of the security guards. Now let's talk about another guard. This guard belongs to our union. This will bring in Sergeant Brandt. His name is Glenn, and Glenn and other guards, because the sheriff's office has guards and officers. Officers have guns, the guards don't. The guards used to be split between two unions when they belonged to agencies. You had the IBW had the bulk of them, and I had about 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of them. And then they were going to be privatized under former county executive Jim Treffinger, and instead of doing that, the now county executive, then president of the field board, Joe DiVincenzo, worked out a deal with the sheriff for the sheriff to take them all under his wing. It didn't work out monetarily any differently to the county, but at least we kept them employed and with our union. And so the sheriff and his volunteered officers and guards and regular sheriff's officers, they went to the St. Patrick's Day parade up in West Orange. And apparently the story goes that Sheriff Armando Frontura was not happy that a number of his charges, so to speak, his guards and or officers, sheriff's officers, were not cleanly shaven. So he put out an edict they had to fully shave. Well, the problem with this is that one of my guards, Glenn, is a Muslim, and is another guard, young guard, younger than Glenn, who's with the IBW. And they were both written up for refusing respectfully, declining as I like to put it, to shave. And the sheriff was insistent, so we did some research because we knew about this anyway, generally speaking. And what happened was in 1999, the Newark FOP sued the city of Newark and or the police department directly, and because there were two police officers who were Sunni Muslims and had very long beards. And this is long before the issues of Sunni and Shia and the invasion of Iraq, long before that happened. So it was a relatively unusual occurrence. And the union, the FOP, took the city of Newark and the police department to court. They prevailed, the city appealed, and it got to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, where there were 3 judges. And that court sustained that these guards had a right not to shave. It was a religious right, act of First Amendment expression, and also because the police department had made accommodations for people with skin conditions not to shave. They had to do the same for religion. Interestingly, when I looked at the decision, I looked at the very end to see who signed it. It was Judge Alito, who is now a U.S. Supreme Court judge. And then it went to the U.S. Supreme Court later that year and was upheld. So therefore, there was Supreme Court case precedent that, respectfully, Armando Fontoura, the sheriff of Essex County, whom I've known for many decades, may not do this. And we hope that he comes to his senses, because I believe he's been so informed by both the county council as well as county personnel that you can't discriminate in this fashion. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's, and by the way, the grievance that I wrote went to Sergeant Brandt, who I just mentioned as having been in our agency. Hey, baby, it's Day Day. Then we have the West Side office. That's our most heavily impacted office due to the chronic shortage of staffing, as I've said many times on the show. Our staffing levels now in the Division of Welfare, the largest welfare agency in the state of New Jersey, the 10th largest in the country, we're bigger than many states, we have the same staffing level of about 821 to 830 total employees as there were in 2000, the year 2000, some almost 15 years ago. But as I've said before, the caseloads for food stamps and Medicaid have gone up 70 to 100%. And so you've got this overcrowding. And what the geniuses, yes baby, what the geniuses did in management was to decide to cram one office, another TANF, that's families with children, TANF office, the downtown office on the 7th floor of that 18 Rector Street where the guards walked out, into the 3rd floor, which is West Side office. 8,000 cases, no additional workers. So every single day there are lines and lines of clients coming into this office, and to the extent that they have to shut the office down and not letting more people in because they keep taking applications but they can't process them. According to the head of the office, my counterpart with the Supervisors Union, the president of PESU, Public Employee Supervisors Union, Carol Perkins, who's the head of that office, tells me she has some 800 overdue cases going into this next month, which means 800 more people coming into the agency to have their cases renewed because they didn't have time to get them on the system. So we did a class action grievance regarding the West Side offices, also the transfer, that we needed to transfer the EA cases. Those are emergency assistance cases. When they created the new West Side office, they created 2 units for emergency assistance. That's for clients who need something right away. They're dire circumstances that they need assistance right away. More case intensive, more work intensive. There are 2 units in that office of 6 workers and a supervisor each, and we're trying to get them to transfer them out of that office to alleviate the workload on the employees as well as the crowd load on the office. Because it's very sad to see human beings, regardless of what you think of the welfare system, standing outside in the cold, rain, snow, men, women, and children infirmed in wheelchairs. Then they get in and wait hours to be seen, and then when they get up there, they may not have what they need. They have to come back multiple times. So now we'll go to health and safety, and actually the last issue regarding the overcrowding is a health and safety issue, because often clients, understandably, take their discomfort and their stress and waiting for hours to be seen out on the first people they see, which is our clerks when they come into the office in the reception booth, and then the workers when they get seen. So this is kind of ironic that we have extremely filthy conditions in our child support office at the Hall of Records. I say that's extremely troubling and seemingly counterintuitive, because that's where the county executive is located with his pristine office. That's where the freeholders are located with their pristine, clean offices. But our office on the first floor of that building, our offices, a string of them, all have blinds that have not been cleaned in years, air conditioners not cleaned in years, just dust and pollen and crap building up, people getting sick, our members and clients from the dust, and they also have cockroaches. So I wrote a grievance protesting that and asking that the resolution would be that our people, our affected members, adversely affected members in that workplace get the same cleaning regimen of their work site as do the freeholders and as does the county executive. Then you have mundane issues, even more mundane than that, is the need for an updated telephone directory. The last time our telephone directory had been updated, everybody, because we have constant movement now with all these changes, wholesale at times. was October of 2014. That may not seem a long time ago now that it's April of 14, but 15 rather. That I'm trying to go backwards. That's problematic. So they did finally update it, and I withdrew the grievance. Then it's very interesting that Governor Christie had another one of his major people resign. This guy's name is Richard Constable, and he was over the Hurricane Sandy recovery effort, which you know became a fiasco, and still is, with I believe several hundred people still not back in their homes after 3 years or so since the storm, or more, whatever it was. And this guy was the Department of Community Affairs head. And I had written about this guy when he was first appointed by the governor. He had worked with the governor, as most of the governor's people had or do. They were in the, when he was Attorney General, they were lawyers working for him. So I wrote this back on, 2012, when I went to, there was a Black History event, which they do every year, in Irish or whatever, and he was one of the honorees, this guy Constable. And I noted that on the county executive's website, it actually had a press release about the event where this guy is quoted as saying that he's a public employee. He's a public employee, not a civil servant. He's a public servant. That public servants, the difference he said was that public servants care about the public, implying, of course, that civil servants, as we, don't. So I referred to him as the bad-mannered barrister, and took umbrage with his description of public employees in general. Then we have an interesting little thing that happened in Indiana, this happened back in January, but actually it was January 2012. It was updated on April of 13. But if you've been watching the news in Indiana, there's a big deal there where the governor signed a bill that was really anti-homosexual, LGBT community, and he got so much heat from it, from the big corporations in particular, that he sent it back to the legislature after first refusing to, and redid it with supposed safeguards written in. Same thing happened in Arkansas. Well, this happened in Indiana, where a Republican member, of the Indiana General Assembly, withdrew his bill to create a pilot program for drug testing welfare recipients after one of his Democratic colleagues amended the measure to require drug testing for lawmakers. So when it came to drug testing, him and his counterparts, if he required welfare recipients to be drug tested. And by the way, in the states where they have done that, they've shown like a 2%, smaller percentage than the general population utilizing drugs that are welfare. It's just another excuse to vilify and demonize welfare recipients. Started with Ronald Reagan back with his welfare Cadillac queens, and it's gone on. Big issue happening now with the public employees and has been going on. In 2011, it effectuated, I think 6/15/2011, a bill was passed called Chapter 78. It had been, the basic tenets of it had been championed by, ironically, the state Senate person who's now the president of the Senate, Steve Sweeney, who is a business agent or some organizer or something for the Iron Workers Union. Of course, that's private sector, we're public sector. And for 2 years, or at least before this bill passed, and before, I think even before he was Senate president, he'd been pushing for legislation to make public employees pick up a bigger portion of their pensions and their health benefits. What we came to realize was that the private sector, we've known this, but we realized the impetus and the confluence of these things occurring, is the private sector unions in the United States used to be, I believe in 1950, the year I was born, I think they were at least 40-something% of all the jobs were unionized jobs. And that had occurred during the 30s and 40s with the struggles of unions and corporations, which is going on again in a different way. So we realized that the private sector unions, particularly the building trades, in the building trades you pay your dues, but they come out of a decent salary, and they should earn it. They do some very hard work. And drywallers and all kinds of other manual labor, electricians, and iron workers. And we found that in 2008 with the crash, financial crash, they lost at least 50% of their members getting jobs. So therefore, the money that they would take out from that salary, large salary, will also come to pension and health benefits for their members because they ran their own plans. And what happened then is they started looking at the public sector and saying, we have too rich of benefits. Instead of raising all boats up, the idea was to sink the public employees and bring us down to their level. That's just the way not many of us interpret what happened. So what they did was in 2011, they passed this bill, Chapter 78, which did two things. One, and I'll get into this other aspect later, they took the pensions of the public employees, in which we were paying, I think, about 5% out of our pay, or 5.5%, something like that. And they increased it 2%, 1% immediately and 1% spread over 7 years. The supposed quid pro quo there was that each government in New Jersey, there's municipal, county, those are called local governments, and you have state government, they're all in some form of pension system. Many of them are in the same. Many of the public employees in the cities and counties and state are in the PERS, the biggest one. Then you got the teachers, then you get the firemen, they get your police. So what they do is they said, okay, you got to pay 2% more, but the state, the governor, whomever it would be, would have to ensure or make sure or pay a certain amount of money each year of those 7 years to get the pension system whole again, to up to, I believe, a minimum of 80% solvency, meaning if 80% of all the public employees employed were to leave at the same time and retire, I'm saying if all of them were to, that 80%, they get 80, there'd be enough for 80% of them, which was never going to happen, but that's what it was. But because our pension was rated under Governor Whitman and not paid into under any other governor until Corzine put about $1 billion in, and then Christie put in some as a result of this bill, then he decided, well, we can't put any more in, we can't afford it. So, and then we went to court, and we're in court now. The Judge Jacobson, who ruled in the governor's favor reluctantly last year because he went there 3 days before the budget went into effect, and the state budget has to be legally balanced, the judge let him pay less, maybe half of what he was supposed to pay into the system. This year he's trying to do the same thing. The judges tell him, no, you've got to pay the amount in. He's appealing it. The unions are suing him. So we've got our pensions at risk, and also the proposal the governor now says is that, you know that bill that I pushed and said I was in favor of in 2011? You know that same bill that I signed, and that bill that I've been using for my creds to run for national office, specifically the President of the United States, saying that I can reach across the aisle. I've been successful in a blue Democratic state like New Jersey, and I reach across the aisle to my Democratic counterparts. We get these things done to curb in the abuses of these terrible public employees, most of whom make on average about $40,000 a year, not the $100,000 you've been seeing and above. What we're going to do is we're going to also make them pay now. The governor says, oh, that bill, it was unconstitutional. I signed it. I pushed for it, but it's unconstitutional, so you can't make me put all the money in. And that's what the lawsuits are about. And actually, the judge in that is supposed to come out with her decision, I think in May 12th or so. So the other thing was they want us now to pay public employees more for much more for their health benefits. Even worse than that, they want to change the pension system from a defined benefit, meaning you put so much in and your employer puts in so much in every year that you work, and then when you retire 25, 30 years later, if you're lucky enough to live that long, after working in a job that doesn't pay a lot of money but has good benefits and at least had good benefits and stuff like that, now they say, well, we want you to go into a 401k program, and at least for less senior people, or everybody actually, they want to freeze the pension where it is based on salary. So if I'm making $60,000 now and I work another 10 years, those additional 10 years won't count towards my pension. Instead, they'll put me in a 401k type program where the state will match the money, and now I'm also paying more for my pension, I'm paying more for my health benefits. It's really a nightmare. And we have some examples what would happen. A worker earning $68,000 a year now, with 20 years in the system and 5 years go to retirement, they would have gotten and would now get $34,799 annually. Not $100,000, not $150,000 you've been reading the paper, but $35,000 a year. And then that's having worked for 25 years at $68,000 a year at the end of it. It doesn't start at $68,000. Well, that person would go from $37,800 to a benefit of $27,296. Another worker with 10 years in the system, earning $75,000, which most don't, and public employees don't, and at the end, they would have gotten $50,000 pension. They're cut down to $27,499, which is obviously just unacceptable. They're not that big of pensions to begin with, and then to cut them down almost in half is absolutely criminal, literally and figuratively. So what we're doing, we're suing, we're doing job actions. So what this is a PowerPoint that was put out by our union, CWA, funding our pension, more broken promises. And this was at a big shop steward meeting. And it gives you page by page the whole beginning of Chapter 78 and what the governor's trying to do now. This is absolutely incredibly cruel. You have a guy that the governor who said that was Chapter 78 would solve all the problems, the pension would be solvent, the health benefits would be in good shape. We went from 1.5% of our salary, which is about $800 on a $60,000 salary, to some paying between $4,000 and $6,000 a year from $800 for their health benefits, depending on how much they make and what plan they're in, what level, how good it is or how bad it is. So, and he wants to have a referendum on the ballot to memorialize all these changes he wants to make. He created his own pension commission to give him exactly what he wanted to hear, and made up of millionaires and other well-to-do people. And it would virtually end the non-forfeitable right to a pension for public employees, meaning you could not, non-forfeitable means you can't be forced to give it up. This would change that through a vote by the populace. Whether it gets there or not is up to the legislature, and I highly doubt that it will get anywhere near what he wants in the current form. Why? Well, politics sometimes work to your favor, and in this case, you have several individuals want to take his place in 2017 and run for governor as Democrats. One of them is Senate President Steve Sweeney. Another is Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop, et cetera, et cetera. And we just struck a bell. All the politicians are in the pension system in New Jersey, and many of them for many, many years. Many of them have family members that are hired politically, either because of influence or because they earned it through a civil service test, or both. And we don't think they're going to want, and there's a lot of constituents that are retired public employees, active public employees, and I don't think they're going to want to hurt themselves, which is what they'd be doing. So we'll see what happens. It's not all doom and gloom, though. We do have victories. We had a victory on May 13th. I wrote a memo to our members announcing a victory where we had one particular office manager who decided on his own to interpret a new element within our contract with the county in his own unique fashion. And it's very simple. For years, we were only allowed to take half days and whole days off. And people needed less time, and you had to lose them for a whole day or a half a day rather than increments of a quarter, half, 3/4, full. So we got quarter day increments into the contract. And that was written by the county administration. It was written as saying that a quarter day equals 2 hours. Well, this genius this manager of this office decides that he's going to interpret it as 1.75 hours and was docking people, or not paying them accordingly. We won the grievance, and now they have to pay everybody back that were affected by this. And it was 2 offices because he was in one office and they transferred him to another, and he did the same practice in both. So, other good news. Yes, there's always some good news. Here's an article, March 25th. New Jersey slashes prescription costs for retired workers. One of the things the governor did as a result of Chapter 78 was, on the sly, decided that he was going to cut back prescription co-pays by the government for thousands of retired public employees, such as my lovely wife upstairs, Kathleen, who's been retired 10 years from the county employee, and her sister, and I didn't know them before they got there, contrary to what one county executive tried to say publicly back in the late 90s, early 2000s. He tried to say actually that I got them their jobs, which is fascinating because they were hired before I was and before I even knew them, and well before I became president of the local, but logic doesn't mean anything in politics. So we sued them again, the unions did, and following a ruling from the state Supreme Court appeals court, appeals court, in December, said that New Jersey Pension Division overstepped its authority when it hiked the drug rates following the celebrated pension reforms Christie enacted in 2011. So now all these people, including my wife, will have to have a payment back for the overpayments that they made. We have other problems such as, here's a genius one. The county didn't pay for postage last month in February, month before last. That means there were no mailings, or virtually no mailings, go out to clients of their letters, their appointment letters. So since they didn't get the appointment letters, they were didn't come in, they were cut off from assistance. So then they came in to re-up their assistance through no fault of their own. They have to come in, and they're coming in constantly, as I told you earlier in the show, because we don't have enough people to see them. So they come day after day after day, because we also have a case banking system where no one worker sees you. You see round robin, things get lost. There's no computer system to keep track of it. So they finally got the posters together, and it's happened before, it'll happen again. We have a new division director coming in, Jeanette Page Hawkins. We haven't had one in about 2 months. She starts this coming Monday, 4/6/15, and we look forward to her. She's coming from the Division of Family Development, which is a state agency, which is over all the welfare agencies, so it should be interesting. And finally, we have the issue of why should you care? Why should anybody out there care about public employees, let alone public employees that are welfare workers, servicing those people who are getting public assistance from your tax dollars? Well, you should care because, first of all, the law says that they are entitled to those benefits. Secondly, that you have to provide it in a timely fashion and a fair fashion, and you're not doing that with a lack of staff. And third, another reason is these are folks that are in the community, many in the communities in which you live, whether you realize it or not. And what happens in the community affects all of the community, either positively or negatively. It's also just pure fairness. And if the mighty public employees, as they're described, if their unions can be intimidated and browbeaten into almost non-existence by changing the laws, everything else, it could be a real problem for us and for you. So to avoid that problem, I say thank you for viewing us on Labor's View, and we hope to see you on future shows. I'm David Weiner. Thank you.
No, it is not hard to see that it's the union of our hearts that makes us a family. That means you and me. I have a voice. My union speaks for me.